She's an award-winning writer, a hunting guide, archery and rifle instructor, keynote speaker, and all-around outdoors woman who encourages you to get outside, hunt, fish, shoot, and savor all that life has to offer. And now, here's your host, Mia Anstein.
Hey, hi, hello, you all. It's wonderful to be visiting with you again. Today is the day that we have opened the big game application process for the state of Colorado. And that's the state that I live in, so it's one that I pay close attention to. And if you are interested in hunting big game in the fall of 2023, then you need to head over there and check it out and work on your application. And from Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they say that hunters are encouraged to submit the applications early to avoid complications and delays. And while they have streamlined this process over the years and they've really worked to make sure that there aren't any complications, as they label it, there have been instances where everybody waits until the deadline, which is April 4th at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. And when that happens, it just overloads the website and the website has crashed. So I just wanted to make you aware that it is time. So as we get going, there will be a link in the show notes, not only to Parks and Wildlife's website, but I'll also include a link to the big game brochure and to some other resources that are going to help you with the draw process. If you do have questions, I can truly help you in this category. If you go over to miaanstein.com, you can click on a tab on the header, or if you're on your phone, you can click on the little bars on the side in the corner. Click on the tab that says Learn. When you look in there, I do have some gear lists that can help you. And then if you scroll down a little further, you can book a personal consultation. And for talking about the draw process, if you book a 30-minute meeting, I can help you out with the draw process. Or if you don't want to do that, go ahead and you can email me. The email address is contact@miaanstein.com, or you can direct message me on social media. The podcast can be found Mac Outdoors. It's on Instagram and Facebook, or you can message me on most social media outlets. Just look for Mia Anstein. I will make a disclaimer as far as Facebook right now for both the podcast and for me personally. I am locked out of Facebook right now. So that is something that if you have messaged me there, I apologize for not getting back to you. And if you choose to message me there, I don't know how long it's going to take for me to regain login credentials. And on a side note, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about this. I got tired of Facebook listening to my conversations and literally listening to my conversations, because for a while there, I was having an issue where my app on my phone was making me log in like every day. And that's something that makes me paranoid, because when your account is hacked, what will happen is there are links that appear to be the actual app, and it's not. It's a mirror, and it's somebody that's going to hack and get your password. So this was really annoying to have this happen on my phone. And I was griping about it one day to a friend, and lo and behold, moments later, I look at my email and I have an email from Facebook saying, "Are you having difficulty with your password and login?" And what that told me is they are listening, which I've always known they listen, because that's what happens. You get advertisements. If I'm talking about paddleboarding, I get an advertisement for a carrier, or I get an advertisement for the local shop here in town where you get paddles and boards and, the stores. So while I knew that they were listening, it really did annoy me that they immediately shot me an email. And so long story short, I apologize for going on that tangent. I deleted the app. And this is where the issue occurred. recently my computer had been bogging down, and so I decided to clear the cookies. And if any of you have ever done that before, what it does is it clears the browsing data. I had it where I thought the setting was one where I wouldn't have to redo logins and such. Well, apparently I didn't have it that way, because I did have to log into a couple of apps, not all apps, but one of them was Facebook. And the way Facebook works is it sends you a code to your app. And since I'm not logged in on any apps, I couldn't receive a code. And I do have two-factor authentication enabled on, I think, most of my social media. I don't know. But I have it enabled on Facebook. So with the two-factor authentication, it should send me a text message. Well, I asked for it to do that, and I received no text message. And so then I asked it to call me with a code so I could log in, and I selected that option, and nothing. So there are additional options, and one of those is to have it send you a code via your email, and that worked. And then once you get that, then you have to display your identification, and it verifies that it's you. Well, in Colorado, we have these really odd driver's license that have microscopic text on there, and I did get that as clear as I could in the authentication that I was doing, but apparently it couldn't verify, and I'm guessing it's because it's not readable. So I've had to redo that, and as I said, long story short, I hope that you don't deal with this in your life. And that's why I'm sharing this with you, is so that you know how to regain access. And if you're interested in learning about updates on this progress, go ahead and reach out on other social media outlets and let me know. And I may include an update on a future podcast episode. So that is that. And so before I get going with today's episode, this one is a hunt from this last fall. And I really want to share it as inspiration because this was a first-time hunter who had just a wonderful hunt and had some ups and downs in the hunt. And I really hope that it will inspire you to get out and hunt this fall. And maybe it'll inspire you to pursue some big game and enjoy the outdoors. So I hope you enjoy this episode.
This winter, stay warm from head to toe with WSI Sports' heater gear layers. Use Leah's affiliate code LLCO10 at WSISports.com and get 10% off your order. All products are proudly made in the USA. WSI Sports is bringing back pride in American-made clothing. That code once again, LLCO10 for 10% off at WSISports.com.
Today, I have another special guest, and this is one of my favorite pastors in the world, and we're going to be sharing some hunting adventures with you. Welcome to the show, Pastor Bror. Would you please say hello to my audience?
Good morning. Hello. Glad to be here with my favorite outdoor podcast host, Mia. Flattered that I'm one of your favorite pastors, but I think I already knew that since you're almost always in church, unless you're at at some sort of a function or out hunting with somebody.
Since I do travel quite a bit, I do actually, for listeners, if you ever have times when you can't get to church, I do church online with our other LCMS. Is it the mothership that does they do morning matins and morning services, as well as some weekend services. And then with Armed Lutheran Radio, where I'm a cast member, one of the listeners there, he is actually another LCMS pastor, and he holds services online. So even though I'm not there in person and can't receive sacraments, I do try to go to church almost every morning.
Yeah.
So let's get kind of going and we know that you're a pastor, but also you had a great hunting adventure this fall, but you're not a new hunter. How long have you been hunting?
Well, it depends. I mean, I used to tag along with my my cousins over Minnesota Education Week Association weekend. And I'd come along with my BB gun and when I was younger and, hunt squirrels and small stuff like that, probably wasn't quite right, but I never got arrested for it. And then we left Minnesota when I was the year that I was able to start, actually hunting. I could get my Minnesota hunter's education card, and I was so excited. My dad took a call to California, and it took another 3 years for me to officially get started with hunting. I started hunting quail out there in the San Gabriel Mountains. I live up above Los Angeles. We used to refer to Los Angeles as down below, and been hunting, ever since then anyway. Upland game birds mostly. So, but this year, finally everything came together, and I was able to go on an elk hunt. I'm like 47 years old. I've always wanted to do, big game. The closest thing I've done to that is turkey, which kind of falls under big game, but it's still sort of upland. I don't.
Yeah, turkey are kind of in a class of their own. It's not big game, not small game.
Right.
They're kind of just their own thing. Of course, turkeys have to be silly like that.
but as a pastor, I had to spend a lot of time in my early 20s in school. It takes 8 years to get through that, and I was in the Air Force before that, and and then my first parish was Utah, and I think I drew out once or twice, and every time I got foiled by funerals and other things coming up, and so I couldn't make use of the time that I had to actually do a real hunt and do anything. And of course, there's budget issues too, but then this year got to do it, and was really happy to be able to go and spend the time with you and Hank, who helped me out in filling that tag, which I don't think I would have been able to do without your expertise.
I mean, that's the thing when somebody's a new hunter, something that we forget, because I grew up hunting and with the hunting family. So sometimes you forget what the challenges may be for a new hunter. So first of all, with the application process, you applied when you were in Utah and then in New Mexico, or how long had you been applying?
So I was a pastor in Utah, and I applied. I don't know if it was every year, but I did try to, draw out on elk and deer, and I was successful in the draw out phase a couple times. But like I said, then when it came to actual, getting out there and doing it, I had a few hours or whatever in the evening, and, I would try to get to my unit, and didn't really have the chance to scope out or anything, and didn't really know what I was doing anyway. I'd taken hunter safety class. I've read a lot of articles on it. You just kind of, hope something came in range and you could shoot it, that you would find something, and probably did everything wrong, in order to make that happen. Because I just, didn't really know what to do.
Yeah.
And then, and I've filled out a tag, or I filled out an application to draw out every year that I've been here in New Mexico. I mean, maybe one or two that I've missed, but basically every year, and every year just come up with empty.
And then this year you finally hit the jackpot and won that lottery.
Yes, I won that lottery. Yeah.
And then, so something that kind of astonished me, and I wouldn't say that I was totally surprised, but I know how busy you are. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much pressure is on a pastor and how much time is consumed. I think they think you just show up on Sunday and you work one day a week, where you and I know it's more than that. So how challenging was it to make the time to get out there? Because I know we did skip a day so that you go to church and all that. So tell us about like that challenge of getting out there.
I mean, with a pastor, I always say my schedule is flexible. Normally I get to set my schedule. However, a lot of times things come up that set my schedule for me. So like I said, in the past, I had one time where, I had a dear friend and parishioner who was, on hospice, and, he wanted me to come and visit him every day while he was there, or, going through that. And, I tend to want to do that anyway, with people in those situations. And it was just right during, the 5 days you have to shoot a deer. So, you try to get there, in the afternoon, maybe go spend the evening, morning, whatever. But it just, makes it almost impossible to do it because you're spending so much time traveling back and forth. This hunt, I announced that I was going to a new congregation right before. And so maybe some of the short timers syndrome set in just in time. And I was a little bit more willing to do just the bare minimum of what needs to be done, which was preach on Sunday morning. However, I also have a schedule where, I try to do my devotions and get ready for the next Sunday every morning. And you got to witness some of that because I was staying with you. But, I get up early and just get that stuff out of the way so that I can go enjoy the rest of the day hunting or whatever. It is a little difficult. You never know what's going to happen, and especially today you got cell phones. And so, there's an emergency, you find out about it right away. But it can be quite a challenge to, just set that time aside and kind of blow everything else off that's going on at the church or with your members and whatnot.
Yeah. And that's something that I try to explain to people. I've had people ask for hunting tips over the years. And one of the tips that I usually give is you have to commit the time to the hunt, because I think a lot of people think you can just head out in the afternoon and get that animal, in an hour or something like that. And sure, somebody might get lucky and have that occurrence, but it's very rare. As you saw with some of the taxidermy that I have in my house, some of those, it was the last hour of the last day of, a 9-day hunt, where in New Mexico, we have 5-day hunts. And so if you don't commit that time, if you're not out there, it's very challenging to fill that tag. And so if you're able to get that time, I mean, we have to use the time that we're allotted. So, make the best of what you can do. But if you're able to schedule time off from work or set your own schedule, fortunately, that's something that some people can do, then I do recommend the more time, the better. However, it also is helpful to have people who can help. And so you had a day before we actually hunted with you, a day, and then church, and then we hunted with you. Tell us a little bit about how the hunt went and what you learned from the hunt.
So, I had put in with a group of another family members of the church, that they've put in every year. Normally, 2 or 3 of the people that they put in with draw out. I did it last year, and nobody drew out from that party, which I attributed to the fact that I have incredibly bad luck with those things.
Oh, no.
And then, and they were pretty confident, that normally they get their elk, and they did. However, they got their elk on the second day of the hunt, which was the Sunday that I had not dedicated to the hunt. I wanted to preach that Sunday. And so I hadn't taken that Sunday off. I have a hard time doing that. I try not to hold it against my members who take time to do stuff like that on Sundays. Myself, it's sort of like I gotta be there at church on Sunday. My whole week is gone if I'm not, and it's been that way since I was a kid. And I always just kind of figure that God might reward me for it in the end. It's probably not the best and most theologically way to work or, to think about it. But, I always just take out that time because without him, I wouldn't have any elk to hunt anyway.
Right.
So, I figure, I can at least trust in the Lord that much and go to church and, do my job and do my diligence and figure that even if I don't get, if the hunt doesn't come out successfully, that's okay. I've done what I was supposed to do.
How did you feel so your first day you did see elk, and then the second day we're at church, all of us were, and then we invited you to come out and stay with us and go hunting from our place. How did you feel being the only one who hadn't tagged out yet?
I was okay with it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like I said, I put in, I was hoping, and I kind of had a feeling this year it was actually going to happen, but I've had that feeling before and it didn't. But I mean, so there's two things about it. I love those people that I was hunting with, and I really wanted to go hunting with them. You guys had actually extended the offer earlier, and I was hoping really to get, a shot that first day, also with them. But, I also knew that, going and hunting with Hank and Mia, my chances were probably going to be higher.
For the love of the outdoors, open spaces, and mountains, shop www.mia.limited/one. The Mac Outdoors Mountains Are Calling series of apparel is perfect for you or your loved ones. Support the channel and shop now. www.mia.limited/one.
We hope so. But we have times. So I'll let you tell the story about your hunt, but also another buddy came and hunted, and he has property near where you were hunting, and he did not get anything. So
yeah, and I realized that's true. So, the first day, we actually did see an elk, and I might have had a shot if I was a little faster, but, we had two thoughts going, with the guy that I was hunting with, and we thought that the elk was going to make its way, try to make its way out of the canyon. And there was one way for her to do that. He actually even went down to try to push her that way, but somewhere in there, the elk gave us a slip, which is, it's incredible to think about. I mean, I'm an outdoorsy person. I see the elk all the time. It's something about when you have the gun in your hand, you never do see them like that. But that they can be, so big and just disappear and, give you the slip in ways that you would never think is possible. You think you know exactly what they're going to do, and then they do something just completely different. So, that was the experience on the first day. And, then, I came out there Sunday night and we did a little scouting. And the next day, went back and the elk had this routine. And then when we thought we really had them down and we knew where they were going to be in the morning, then they weren't there, and then we go, looking, and then it happens. They're right in front of us. Like it's just, this fortuitous, opportunity. They cross the road basically right in front of us. By the time we were able to set up and get a shot, I missed it. I don't know how, but I did. I started shaking really bad, and I'll just, it was that. It was like the first time I ever got to pull the trigger on something that big. And
some people refer to that as buck fever because of antlers, but I've actually witnessed that with doe antelope. I've witnessed it with a lot of different animals, and especially when it's a first time. And like Leah, her first archery animal was an antelope, and she shoots archery competitively. She was using her bow every day. Her muscles were conditioned. And when that buck stepped out, she couldn't pull her bow. Like that's how, her heart was racing and her muscles. And then, it's just something where what I was concerned about is there is that adrenaline and then there's that letdown. And I always hope that people don't beat themselves up over it, because it's something with our human instincts. We work hard and we want to be successful. And it seemed like you handled it pretty well, but how did you process that?
I won't lie. I was pretty disappointed in myself and everything. But you can't let. I mean, if I let failure just kill me, I would have done it a long time ago. We spent the rest of the day hunting. We came up with a plan for the next morning. And that went off without a hitch. It just went perfectly. It went every way that I was almost dumbfounded the other way, like, wow, because then that next morning. And the thing is I shot, and Hank kind of coached me through the second shot a little bit more. He was breathe and all of that sort of stuff that you're supposed to do, but you don't consciously think about it as much as when you have somebody there to say, hey, here's how you calm yourself down for this shot. Now, just do it. And he got me through it, pulled the trigger, and and then of course your gun jumps. So when I came back to that same area or whatever, I wasn't sure that I'd hit it because it wasn't there anymore. And Hank kind of played with me on that a little bit.
Why don't you share that story? I think people would crack. Well, it's funny.
Yeah. So I did see it, and I suppose your adrenaline is still rushing, and I started fearing the worst and gave expression to that. I was like, I missed. What the hell am I doing? Why can't I? I was hitting just fine at the range. I didn't practice on sticks, which I in retrospect probably need to do a little bit more of that. Shooting from sticks and everything to get a better feel for that scenario. And Hank's like, yeah, but don't worry, we'll get them. They didn't go that far. They're just on the other side of those trees over there. Grab your rifle, let's go, and so I started following him, and he goes, all right, you see them over there? And I was like, yeah. And then he kind of says, do you see this one right down here? And he points down to the ground, and I was like, you bastard. I might have used some other words, but it was fun. It was fun. And Hank kind of felt bad about, giving his pastor a hard time about it. But I don't think you should feel bad about it at all. I would have felt less of him if he hadn't taken that opportunity to play that prank on me. So.
Well, I'm sure I feel comfortable that I could pull a prank on you also, but did he do that because had you not been so caught up in that adrenaline, you probably would have seen it laying there?
Probably. That's, okay. That you would think, that you would kind of, if you were a little bit calmer mind, you might, but the adrenaline does get a hold of you pretty good, or it does me anyway.
Yeah, it does a lot of people. And that's something that I actually teach seminars and classes on how to deal with that adrenaline and how to control your stress, because with the misses, there are people who will blame it on their equipment, on their optics or their firearm or the sticks. And sticks are challenging to shoot off of. That's something you and I had been together the morning before that. And I knew that you hadn't shot off them before. And so I kind of gave you some tips and figured we're going to work on this when the animals come. But Hank didn't realize that you hadn't shot off sticks before. So I'm glad that he helped you through on the next day a little better, and especially with the adrenaline, because I think once you have a miss, you have to regain your confidence. How do you think shooting at a big game animal is in comparison to shooting waterfowl or upland birds or something like that? Like, what is the difference in that feeling?
I think, for me, I've been hunting upland game for a long time, and I miss, everybody does from time to time. course, I never saw my old hunting partner miss, but he was world grand skeet, champion for years back in the 80s. And, he kind of taught me how to shoot skeet. I mean, the nice thing about learning to shoot skeet is you get used to missing, and you also find all sorts of excuses to make. You find fresh ones. I once convinced a guy that I was missing as bad as I was because my shot was my shells were 1,300 feet per second rather than the 1,200 that I normally like to shoot. As if that made a difference.
Yeah.
But
something with shooting a shotgun, and especially at the skeet range, is a lot of that is mental. And if you have a different load than you normally have, our minds kind of tell us those excuses too, whether we embrace them or not. Our mind will tell us, oh, it's because this is happening today.
Yeah, I mean,
there's clouds and there's sun, or
but I think the thing I find is that normally with upland, sometimes with waterfowl, you have a little bit more time to prepare. So you kind of see the ducks coming in as little specks first, and then they kind of grow in. And the other day I had a perfect shot on a duck hunting, and it was kind of like that. You saw it coming in, you had some time. But my experience with upland game is it has to be so instinctual, especially with like quail or something like that. You have less than a minute and those things are out of range, and so the whole thing happens so fast that you don't really have perhaps time for that adrenaline to really build up. There's always it's an instant adrenaline rush with
Right.
upland game bird, and it lasts for about 2 minutes, and you get a 5-minute high after you've hit it, and you're congratulating your dog on a good point and a good retrieve, and bragging to your friend or whatever. But with the upland, or with the big game, there's a lot more I mean, you see it, you perhaps you even stalk it a little bit, but you're preparing for that shot. I mean, I think even on the second day when we were done, pretty much 5 minutes after daybreak or whatever, you had 5 minutes to set up, and Hank was looking over the herd and telling me which one to shoot at, and they're just they're looking at you and everything. It was you have a little bit more time to build up on that whole thing.
Yeah. And did you have to wait for them to clear one another once you got your rifle on the sticks? Were you having to deal with that also, like make sure you didn't hit two, or
A little
make sure they're
bit.
the right direction?
I think, I mean, again, Hank was there to kind of just select the animal, and we went for the last one in the herd, so that wasn't quite an issue. That's the other thing about big game is after that one shot, you have a lot more to eat. After pulling the trigger on that one, we'll be eating on this for a year probably, but
Yeah.
it's been good.
So do you think you'll hunt big game again? Do you have some plans, or as the opportunity might arise, or do you have something next on the list?
I sure hope so. Again, I'm moving from New Mexico to Colorado at the end of this month. I'll be in the Fort Morgan, Trinity Lutheran in Fort Morgan this next year for however long. I think the deer and the antelope hunting are excellent from the reports I hear out that way. The elk and mule deer that are associated with the mountains, I'm kind of going out to the plains, but that doesn't preclude me from trying to as opportunity arises. I'm game for anything. Hank and I were talking about maybe doing some hog hunting too at some point, and it's always kind of been something I've wanted to try. Getting some pigs and whatnot. So yeah.
Very cool. After you took your animal and we brought it back to process, what did you think about the work that it takes to process a larger animal?
there, I guess I've been around it a little bit more. Never processed the whole animal myself, but high school I was with the FFA, and we used to have, barbecues where we would actually slaughter lambs on the high school property in California. I don't know if they could get away with that anymore. It's kind of
I don't know that
dumbfounded
they could do that anymore.
kind of dumbfounded that we could do it at that point.
Yeah.
In any case, it was kind of fun back then. Because then you had all these, these city kids that, I mean, I'm basically a city kid myself, but I've always been kind of on the edge and drawn towards the country that, they'd never seen anything like that happen before. And you got into all of the animal rights activism and how can you do that? And how, this is so evil, sort of thing. And, that is just sort of, what are you talking about? Why would you call that evil? This is what God has created us for. Sort of was always my thought on it. But, and then I worked on a ranch in Montana for a while after that, before joining the Air Force. And so I've seen, the game animals being processed, but never mine, and never been there for the whole process. And it was, I was glad to have some people there that knew what they were doing and could kind of, help out, because that's not really a one-man job. I mean, it would take a day or two to do it, one man, I think. Knowing how to cut the roasts and everything, it was a lot more. And you have a little bit more time to reflect on the nature of what you have done there. This is life that you have taken to sustain your life, sort of thing. So
Yeah. Had you ever had that kind of feeling when you shoot a bird?
yeah, I mean, it's again, you're sort of, it's a bird. I don't, it's always funny how we classify animals and stuff in our heads. Even, me as a hunter, I always make fun of those PETA billboards, about where do you draw the line between these things. But I think we all do, and a lot of that's kind of cultural or whatever, that we do those things. It's just a bigger animal, really. I don't think that there's not really any, I didn't have any guilt or regret or anything like that, but there is, this, yeah, you've killed this animal, and here's the result of it. When it comes to that sort of thing, the other distinction that I always kind of, always wrestle with as a Christian, as a pastor, as a theologian over the years is this distinction between humanity and nature, if you will. I'm always kind of puzzled, with the, sort of, I mean, even if they're not actually atheists or whatever, I think, that sort of thought almost permeates our culture to a point where even I find myself just not thinking about our relationship with God in all of that all the time. If you're, going to go from a pure evolutionary, there is no God, this is just sort of some sort of a cosmic accident that happened that brought about life. I always wonder, well, then how is it that what I do as a human for the sustenance of my life and the life of my children and my species, any different than, say, ants making a colony and milking aphids on a rosebud, or, a beaver building a dam. And, what's the difference between a dam that the beaver builds and the dam that a human builds, say Hoover Dam or something like that, except for size, these things, if you're going to go from that perspective, how am I outside of nature? How is it any more unnatural for me to kill Cecil the lion than it is for Cecil the lion to kill an impala, is sort of, my thought process. I've talked to people and they say, well, we should have evolved higher than that. We should have done what? How would we be the directors of that? And yet there is this sort of, I think, innate distinction that we as humans make, at least in the West. It's sort of assumed that somehow man is apart from, has a distinction from the rest of nature. As a Christian, I process this through as, God has created us to have, we're the pinnacle of creation. We are, God created us to have dominion over his creation, so that we are to participate in creation in this way as caretakers of his creation. And then, it becomes a matter of, what does that mean to be a caretaker? What does that mean to be the gardener, or the zookeeper, or somehow both? And, and from that perspective, for me, to go out hunting and stuff like that is almost, all right, this is what, God has really created me to do. This is me, kind of fulfilling this part of my job as the man that he made me, to be out here participating in his creation by helping out these management issues that need to go along with farming, with just having elk herds for anybody to see, deer, whatnot, that if you don't manage them, then these animals die deaths that are perhaps even worse, and create problems where the sustenance of that population isn't even possible. But we are, it was funny because that day before I shot the elk, I tried to read through the Psalms every month. It was Psalm 8 that I read that morning, just as we were going out. And, he's given us dominion over the works of your hands, and given us dominion over all the sheep and the oxen, and also the beasts of the field. And there, there's this distinction that comes in for me as far as, even in the Genesis 1, there's this, distinction between domestic animals and beasts of the field. By that is meant elk, lions, elephants, whatnot, that God has put aside animals that he considered livestock, that the man would have an even more intimate relationship with than these wild animals. We also have a relationship with, but they're not domesticated, they're wild, and there's a different management that goes into those than goes into a herd of cattle.
What you're talking about just reminded me, and it intrigues me. And the only explanation I can give is to God. But how is it that I can be in the goose blind in the morning and I can watch the geese come in, I can shoot a goose and have that for dinner. But then also I can be driving down the highway and see a flock of geese go by. And I'm just personally, I'm always in awe of all the creatures. And I'm just like, wow, those are so beautiful and they're so amazing. And I don't have to shoot it. And it's something that I've had people who don't hunt, when people that don't hunt, they're asking, how can you do that? And to me, the only explanation that I can give is that God gave us dominion over the creatures, and it's part of managing them, and it's part of our sustenance. But what do you think of how we're able to do that?
I mean, the same way, it always baffled me. I remember, when I worked on the ranch in Montana, we had some problems with some animals, and called out a vet to look at them. And the vet gave us the bill, and I was looking at the bill, and I thought, well, there goes the whole profit margin off of that animal. The farmer is not going to make anything off of that animal now.
Yeah.
And yet, he cared about the animal and its well-being enough to actually provide that care for that animal at that time. And then a few months later, loading them up onto cattle cars and sending them to market because you need to make a living. One thing in that relationship I will say is when I moved from Minnesota to California, I remember I went through, it was more than a culture shock. I grew up out in the woods in Minnesota. There was, kind of a small town, ride our bicycles everywhere, Gen X, where you didn't come home until the lights were on, sort of thing. And I always enjoyed the woods and the lakes and the rivers and swimming in them. And I would see, maybe a minx or something at times. And, you just sit there and watch that animal for a while and you'd be kind of fascinated with it. I remember when I moved to California, one of the biggest problems I had was we were now out in the desert. I had no appreciation for the desert. It was just wasteland to me. It was total, just like, what is this? The Joshua trees were kind of interesting, but they didn't provide shade.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started quail hunting out there that I really started to gain an appreciation for the desert, which I now just love. I can hardly imagine, living outside of the desert. And I think part of the thing is for me is that when you get to participate in the nature that way, you develop perhaps a deeper appreciation for God's creation, or for nature, if you will. You begin to understand those animals in a completely different way. Now they're not just some sort of ornament, but now you've interacted with them, and there's in a very primal way, if you will. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's the word I'm going to use. And so, I think this is something I've read in a lot of books, Robert Ruark and whatnot too, where they talk about how, the hunter actually has a greater appreciation for the nature than a lot of the people who just kind of observe it from a distance. Which is why, it's like Theodore Roosevelt started all of our national parks, right? It wouldn't have happened except that he was a hunter and he saw the value to that. If it was to the city dwellers that now kind of oftentimes look down on hunters and whatnot and don't understand what we're doing, it wouldn't be there. If it wasn't for, like guys like Baron Bror von Blixen of Finnica, in Kenya, at the turn of the century and whatnot, hunting elephant and realizing that, the elephant herds are dwindling. If it wasn't for that, the poachers would have had their way completely. And there wouldn't have been laws set up to kind of manage it and whatnot. I don't know if that answers the question completely, but I do find that, when you've had to consider where that animal might be at what time during the day, what they're doing in order to take and harvest it, you don't have perhaps the information you need to have the same appreciation for that animal that a hunter has. And it's, if people don't want to hunt, that's fine, but we all need to make our living some way. Years ago, I went on a fishing trip. It was interesting because there was a lady she was fishing salmon with us, and she was very weak. She could hardly even get the salmon in the boat. I helped her a couple times, and we started talking, and I said, so, what brings you out here? And she says, well, I've been a vegan for the last 10 years. And, it finally hit me that I can't sustain as a vegan. It's causing health issues for me. And she says, and I thought, well, if I'm not if I'm not going to be a vegan anymore, I at least owe it to go and get my own, and we can't all do that. When it comes down to it, this elk may have cost me more than any beef I ever purchased in the grocery store. It's not.
Did you have to buy a bunch of equipment or just the license or
the equipment, the license, the time, all of those things, play into it, and then, if you're not lucky enough to have friends like I have, then you start buying guides and you have deer leases and all of this other stuff that people talk about that have fatter checkbooks than me. And I mean, even with quail hunting and stuff like that, sometimes I add up like, I went for 3 days and I got 2 quail and I'm like, okay, so I got 5 ounces of meat off of this little trip here. And I spent $30 on the box of shells for it. And, there's a $500 gun. I don't know if I want to like price that into, because I use that over and over again, but I got $110 worth in gas to get here, $200 in the hotel room. You start adding all that up, and that's an expensive 5 ounces of meat. You better do something nice with it.
A couple of years ago, we had hunted quail down in New Mexico near you. And we had our non-resident hunting license, our stamps, we had an access fee for where we went. And that first quail that hit the ground, I was like, well, that's a $500 bird. I wasn't counting the ammunition and the gun and the mileage. I was just counting license fees. There's a $500 bird. And I was like, let's shoot another one so we can reduce this cost, But really, I think it's more that wild experience and being out there. Something that I enjoy is being with other people too when I'm out hunting.
And I think that's it. It's not about how much you're paying for this. It's about that experience. It's about being with friends. It's about being out and you're paying for the whole experience. At this point. Otherwise, I mean, it's economically it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And so, you can't expect that everybody's going to have the opportunity to do that sort of thing. It's not gardening, gardening, you got a balcony, you can at least, do a raised bed sort of thing or something. It's expensive to do it at times. And there are things you can do to reduce the costs and perhaps, find ways of doing it cheaper. What I was getting at is this lady, she probably isn't going to have for the rest of her life time to go and do, a day fishing trip. The money, I think it was like $150 per person to get on this boat. And then you get done, you tip in the crew and, stuff like that. And it adds up pretty quick where it becomes a lot cheaper to go to the grocery market. And yet, my hats went off to her that she realized, okay, actually humans are meant to eat meat. We're not meant to live off of vegetable matter, which even that, if you realize what has to go into creating the fields and everything like that, you're not exactly not killing things, just eating a vegetarian diet. But she realized that, and then she says, but I want, this deeper connection with my food. I want to go out and at least do this once or twice, so that I know what went into putting this meal on my plate. And I think that's respectful of nature. And I think it's not out of the realm for most people to be able to do something like that, at some point in their life, whether it's fishing or hunting. There's always, fishing's a lot cheaper. I don't like it as much because I have a hard time just sitting there. Fly fishing, maybe a little bit better, except I'm just no good at it. So
maybe next time, we won't do a hog hunt next, we'll go fly fishing.
Yeah,
we can float the river, and then that's more exciting because you're not just in one spot.
Right. I've gone fly fishing maybe 3 times. I've had success once, and I mean, it was awful. I mean, right here at the Quality Waters, people are pulling out these big, huge trout. And the one that I managed to actually, get to bite my line and set the hook properly and get to me was about the size of my hand. In the Quality Waters, where people come from all over the world to pull out trout bigger than their whole body. Sometimes it was crazy. I mean,
now that's a fishing story you're telling right there.
Well, my friend that day, he caught a trout that was actually longer than his arm. It wasn't bigger than his body, but it was longer than his arm. I was dumbfounded. I was, what? Here I am. My trophy is 3 inches long.
Well, it sounds like you're about like me, because I usually catch stuff and they're like, well, you caught the bait. Now we can go fishing.
That's sort of the way.
As far as the elk and meals, I know you went home and cooked up some stuff. Tell us about meals and how you cooked it. Did you have some stories at the table, or what happened when you went home and cooked up elk?
I think the first thing I did was backstrap because it was just there, and it was good. And and I kind of just did it as a steak. The next thing I did was a tenderloin. I got a recipe from Coyote Cafe, and they should call me. I have some improvements for them. But it was sort of a marinade that was done with beer and then a mushroom. I actually made it into a cream sauce with a little mustard in there for flavor, because I did something different. But the next time I did it with when my son was here, his last night, we had the other tenderloin, and I did the same recipe, but I made the marinade with red wine, and it was much better. Mm-hmm. Basically, it was red wine, hoisin sauce, soy sauce, and then you marinate the steak in that, or the tenderloin, and then you cook it in the pan separate from that. But when I pulled it out, then I put some onion, some shallot. There were shallots in the marinade. Put some onion and mushrooms down on it, kind of, pulled up the fond on the pan, poured some of that marinade in there and cooked that up. And then to thicken it, I just poured heavy cream in there and, put that over the potatoes and that you cook separately, obviously. And probably a little bit ahead of time.
You're making me hungry.
Yeah, I know. I do this to my friend. I go out skeet shooting. They're like, well, how'd you cook this? And I get extravagant. I get this one I got from a recipe that it was Coyote Cafe, but oftentimes, like a few years ago, I told my friend, we got to shoot 20 ducks, and he's like, why? And I'm like, I need to make basically a fond, so I can make this duck and port recipe that I got off of Trinken and Essen from Germany, and he's like, well, that's a lot of animals, but we managed to get the stock made, and with duck feet. I needed a lot of duck feet is what I needed to make the stock, and carcasses and stuff like that go into it. They're always laughing at, I got these recipes that have 4 or 5 processes in them, but they're always delicious when I get done. So
yeah,
it was good.
Yeah. I have some that are simple recipes and some that are complex like that. And all those flavors, they just come together. And something that I do, and even when I put recipes on my website, I always tell people, like, make it your own. Because actually, when I'm typing up a recipe to put on my website, usually when I'm cooking, it's like sprinkle this and pour in that. Like, I don't measure it. I just do it to how it tastes to me. So I'm guesstimating when I type up the recipe. So I'm like, you can change it however you want to make it taste good to you.
Well, for me, sometimes what I do is I'll make the recipe just the way it is. Mm-hmm. I kind of did that the first time with this recipe. I made it just the way it was to see how that turns out. But while I'm doing that, I think about a few other things. And sometimes, my wife Laura is over my shoulder and she's like, well, it would, maybe this would go better. And after a while, you do that, and then you experiment with the recipe after that. And then you get a little bit more confident, and you can see the recipe and you can go, you know what, I think I'm going to do this and then I'm going to do that. And I did that with a goose jerky recipe last year. Switched out one bottle or one cup of water for a cup of whiskey, and and soy sauce for Worcester sauce, and that was a hit. And so then my friend, he was smoking a goose breast the other day, and he took my recipe and mixed it with his old recipe, but he also substituted Worcester sauce for soy sauce. It was a much better jerky that he made. I found afterwards. It was because I've had it both ways, and I liked it the other way, but yeah, we were both more impressed with the Worcester whiskey than the soy. So
I'm gonna have to go cook some lunch after this. Is there anything else that you think people would want to know about your hunt? Any lessons you learned or things you do differently?
Take the shot you have. I guess, I mean, I don't know. I listened to the guy that I was with the first time, and he's like, no, if we shoot it there, it's going to be kind of a pain to get it out. Let's, wait for it to get over here. And then it doesn't pan out. So, I think, perhaps just taking the shot that you have rather than waiting for one that you might have is best. That was also the first day of the hunt, though. So I think, the other thing, just enjoy it, right? Enjoy the time. It was kind of fun that this one was, it was for a cow elk, because it takes, you're not out there looking for a trophy. You don't really have a whole lot of bragging rights. I shot a cow. You're not going to mount that on and put it on your wall and having your friends jealous about this antlerless cow that's on your wall. But it does allow, it did allow me, I think, to, with some of that off the table, to just enjoy that, here I was with friends out, seeing new country, getting to know that country in a much more intimate way than you would otherwise, because you're looking at all sorts of things, and it's not just the animal. I mean, we talked about how you get to know the animal better, but you also get a better understanding of just what's going on in that ecosystem altogether when you're out there hunting. And so that was a lot of fun. I guess, my recommendation, do it. If you haven't before and you have the opportunity, go do it. You won't regret it.
I think that's great advice. I'm glad that you came on the podcast. When you said you wanted to come, I was pretty excited. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your background and points of view, as well as the experience, because even experienced hunters, we learn all the time. So there's always something different, a different challenge, different aspects. And it's great to learn from other people's experiences. We don't have to learn everything the hard way.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm excited. I'm glad that you had me on, and I thank you for that.
Do you want to give any shout outs to any of the books that you've written or anything like that for the listeners? Because I do have a book club, and we can throw some in there, and maybe we can have it as one of our books that we read.
Yeah. So, obviously I'm a Lutheran pastor, and the books that I tend to write and do are not, normally they don't have a whole lot to do with hunting. But if you're looking for a great Christian novel that there is hunting involved in it, but it kind of gets into the nitty gritty of life and death, and it's earthy, but also very Christian. Faith Alone, The Heart of Everything by Bo Geertz. I tend to translate more than write. I write articles and stuff every now and then for 1517.org, Christian Lutheran publication, and some other places. That one's the bigger one. But mostly I just translate the works of Bo Geertz, who is a Swedish bishop, very conservative, Bible-believing man, and centered on Jesus. And Faith Alone deals with a civil war, and one of the guys has to kind of live off the land for a while as he's trying to evade authorities. And you'll enjoy it if you haven't read it before.
Well, thank you. And have fun shooting skeet.
Thank you. I will.
Thank you for making it this far in the episode. We hope you enjoyed the show and that you learned a lot. If you have questions or would like to make any suggestions, we appreciate reviews. They do help the show. Or you can contact us. The email address is contact@miaanstein.com. Or you can message again on social media, Mia Anstein or Mac Outdoors. Have a great one, and I'll be talking to you again soon.
Hey, this is Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, host of the Armed Lutheran Radio Podcast, reminding you that the podcast you're listening to is a proud member of the Self-Defense Radio Network. Check out all the great content at selfdefenseradio.net.